So you want to know how to make boom bap beats? Well, stick around for this video and I'll give you a few tricks I know. Before we get into anything, let me show you guys a preview of the beat. So how did I make that? First things first, we're going to start off on the master channel. Over here on the master channel, I always have a compressor and a saturator. And sometimes I'll have an EQ8 just to tinker around a little bit. But for this beat, I start off with a compressor. The reason why I use a compressor is because this boosts a lot of the sounds throughout the instrumental. And it really brings forward a lot of the dirt that is presented in boom bap. Typically, when I use a compressor, it lowers a lot of the sound. So I like to add a saturator to boost those sounds up. And I think it just makes it sound a little bit better compared to just cranking up the output or adding a limiter and boosting the volume that way. But there's tons of different ways you can do it. Whatever you like, go for it. But let me show you guys an example of the beat without the compressor and the saturator compared to when it's on. So as you can hear right there, when the compressor was off, the drums, they kind of sounded empty compared to when it was on. And like I said, it just boosts up a lot of the, nitty and gritty sounds that are in the drums. But now that we're talking about the drums, let me show you guys how I got those. So for the drums, I use Tempo. Tempo is great for boom bap drums because they offer a lot of realistic sounding, vintage, kind of dirty drums. So for this beat, I used Fresh and Clean in the beat selection, and I used Pressure Pusher for the kit selection. And with that being said, I didn't really change too many of the preset drums that they have here, just because I feel like they all sounded great. So let me show you guys how they sound real quick, and then I'll go into how I made the pattern. So yeah, just a quick preview of how the drums sound. They didn't sound like this originally because I do have a few extra effects put on. And speaking of effects, on Tempo, I lowered the decay a little bit to around here just because I didn't want the drums to sound too crispy, too clean. So if I had the decay all the way up here, compared to if it's right here, it just kind of lowers the quality ever so slightly, and it's the small details that matter. Up next, I added a slap. Now this just kind of doubles up all the drums you play. So if I was to put it all the way up here, you can hear it's kind of like a, delay with the drums. You can hear them 2 times. But I didn't want that much of an extreme, so I just put it down to around there and called it a day. Up next, I added room, and the best way I can describe this effect is like natural reverb within a room. So basically, it makes the drums sound a little bit more stereo, like you're actually in the room with the drums while the drum player is playing it. After that, I added some noise. Now, this right here is basically like the bread and butter of boom bap, some noise. So I have some cassette noises, and I also have some vinyl noises, which is the cracks and pops that you hear while I'm talking. And this is just great when you use the compressor as well because it boosts those sounds up so much. And then when you play the drums, those sounds duck. So it kind of has like some natural sidechain. I also selected the duck feature on Tempo. So that just gives me some extra sidechain. And after that, that's when I made my pattern. So let's get into that. Boom bap drums aren't the most complex. Honestly, it's more about the feel rather than the technicality of the drums. So with that being said, I start off simple, the hi-hats. Just a basic hi-hat pattern. And if you notice, I have a different hi-hat right here. So this is how it sounds compared to this one. Slightly different, but the reason why I put those hi-hats right there is because that's where the kick drum plays. So basically, whenever the kick drum plays, this different hi-hat plays, and it kind of changes up the drums a little bit. I also play with the velocity a little bit, so this hi-hat is a little bit louder than this one. And that just gives you a natural human feel. Usually when drummers play, they're not playing the notes exactly the same way. Sometimes they purposely play some notes with less velocity just to give it a nice little feel. And I also added an open hi-hat right here. Nothing much about that. After that, I got the kick and the snare. So the kick, really simple. The way I made this kick, I started off simple. I just had a simple 1-2 pattern playing, and I eventually added to it. So first it sounded like this. And if you notice, it's not a kick drum right here on the 1. Rather, it's a little bit ahead right here. Same with the kick drum right here. It's a little bit early. Same with the kick drum right here. It's also a little early. So the reason why I do that is for swing, basically. Instead of playing the kick on the 1, I like to play the kicks a little bit early because it adds a nice swing to the beat rather than just having the hi-hats playing with the swing that they have. And usually with the hi-hats, I just move those to the right ever so slightly, just because if you move them too much, they sound a little bit too wacky. But if you don't move them at all and just have them quantized perfectly, it sounds robotic. Back to the kick drums. After I got that basic 1-2 pattern, I added some ghost notes. So these ghost notes are important because they give your kick drum a little bit more power, I would say. You know, you have the ghost notes that are really quiet, and then you have the kick drum coming back in at full power. And if you use ghost notes right, it can really put emphasis on certain drums or different parts of the pattern that you want to stand out a little bit more. So right here, I added an extra ghost note before the 2 kick right here. And that's just a nice little change up. Onto the snare. Nothing really crazy about those. I just added a snare on the 2 and the 4. And if you notice, they're not perfectly on the 2 and the 4. And that's, again, because I want to give it some swing. So I moved them a little bit over. I moved them a little bit over to the left, which makes the snares hit early. And that just gives it a nice swing. So after I had that basic pattern, that's when I can start having a little bit more fun. And I decided to add some cymbals and a tom drum. So with those cymbals and the tom drum, this is how it sounds. And notice, I don't have the cymbals playing at full blast. I didn't want the cymbals to be overpowering the hi-hats, so I kind of just lowered them down a lot and just had them kind of in the cut. If you're listening hard enough, you'll hear them. If not, you wouldn't really notice it. And I like little features like that within beats. So after I got the drums, I moved on to the sample. But I didn't want to just loop this sample, so I chopped it up. Here's the chops that I have, and I'll show you guys how I got those chops.
Look at you, see my eyes, see your eyes, watching you and reaching right into your mind.
So you might have noticed that some of these chops sounded like they just were out of key, and that's because I lowered the key on some of these samples. So like this sample,
look at you,
I lowered the key shift by 1. On this chop,
see my eyes,
I lowered it by 4. And the way I got that, I just played around with the chops. And basically, I just wanted to change it up and have a little bit more control over the chords. So I ended up lowering some of the chops up. I left some of them at the original key. And yeah, that's how I got this pattern.
Look at you see your eyes,
see my eyes,
watching you, and look at you see your eyes,
see my eyes,
watching you, and
I'm pretty satisfied with that pattern. This is how it sounds with the drums.
look at you see your eyes,
see my eyes.
watching you, and
Okay, so now we got some momentum going. Got a nice pattern, we got a nice drum pattern, and I'm ready to add more. So let's go ahead and add the bass line. For the bass line, it's real simple. I pretty much go off the kick. So for most of these bass notes, there's a kick. So one right there, one right there, and then all 5 of those bass notes have a kick drum playing with them. The reason why I like to do that is because I like to make the bass line an extension of the kick drum. And basically this is how it sounds. So that's the bass line. And you might be wondering, why do I have these 2 extra notes right here? Basically, I just want to glide into that lower note. So you don't always have to have a kick drum playing on the bass note or have a bass note playing on the kick drum. It's just a good technique to use and utilize, but you don't have to live by it. So usually when I start off the bass lines, I'll just have bass notes playing on the kick. And then afterwards, I go in, listen, and figure out where can I add a few extra notes at to make the bass line sound a little bit better. After that, I was pretty much set with the beat. I just wanted to add a few extra little flares or whatnot. So I added this channel right here. It's still a Serato sample channel, but the reason why I added this one is because if you notice in the sample, the female is talking and saying different things. So I just wanted to add some emphasis on some of the things she said. So this is how this channel sounds by itself. Pretty simple. That's the only thing that plays, but it goes great with the original sample pattern when it's just the bass and the drums playing. So check it out. So the way I got that effect was simple. So basically I duplicated one of these Serato sample channels and I added a few extra effects. So I added an auto filter and I added that just to take out some of the highs. I didn't want your ears to be overwhelmed with highs from this channel and this channel. It would have just clashed and been a little bit unnecessarily loud. So that's why I added this auto filter. Also added a delay, and that's what makes the ping pong effect when it sounds like it's going left and right between your ears. And I just moved the filter up higher as well because I didn't want the bass playing from the sample. It would have clashed with the original bass and it would have been too much bass. Then I topped it off with a compressor to boost those sounds, and I actually raised the output to make it a little bit louder to my liking. One last effect that I added was wide stereo. I just wanted it to be a little bit more stereo and sound like it's surrounding you whenever it plays. And that's how I got that effect. Pretty simple. The last little flare effect or whatnot that I added was some vocals. Vocals are great in boom bap beats, especially old school 1980s rap and acapellas. Those are great. They just give you the perfect vibe. Guys like Busta Rhymes, Q-Tip, anyone from the Wu-Tang Clan. If you use those acapellas, the beat's gonna sound 10 times better. So this is how the vocals sound by themselves, and I'll play it with the beat.
Yo, 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 yo.
So you might notice it sounds kind of weird. It sounds offbeat. It just sounds strange. The reason why it sounds like that is because I actually warped the chops to fit within the timing of the beat. But once I add the drums and the sample, you don't really notice how weird it sounds. You just hear Busta Rhymes in the background saying, yo. So let me show you how it sounds. That's the effect. That's pretty much the beat right there. After I had all that stuff down, that's when I hunkered down and focused on making this beat sound dirty. So how did I do that? I did that by adding a auto filter to the drums. So I added an auto filter and just took out some of the highs. Again, just like with the Decade on tempo, I didn't want the drums to sound like they were super high quality, super crispy. So I added that auto filter to take out some of that crisp. Then I added some erosion, and this is what gives it that dirty, bit-like effect sound. So if I was to raise it all the way up with the drums, let me show you how it sounds. but I didn't want it to be that dramatic and extreme. So I put the amount to 1.48 and I had the frequency at 12. So, well, 12 kilohertz to be exact. And I got a nice subtle erosion sound in the background. You can barely hear it, but like I said, it's the small details that add up. I did the same thing for the sample. You can ignore this filter. I mainly used it in different parts of the beat, but I added erosion. With this one, I put the amount at 1.74 and the frequency was at 8 kilohertz. And again, it just gives it a nice bit sound in the background. So this is how it sounds. If I was to raise it up, you hear it a lot more. But I don't want it to be that dramatic again, so I just put the amount at 1.74. After that, I just kind of EQ'd the beat, not too much, just kind of played around with a few things. One of those things was the bass between the sample and the bass line. So if you see here, I added a spectrum on the bass line, and that was so I can see what frequencies were being played or activated while the bass line was playing. So take a look at this. So after the bass line plays, I get to see where most of the frequencies were playing. I'm not really worried about these frequencies because you don't really hear them too much. This is the main frequency that you're hearing, and it's somewhere between, let's see, 52 hertz and 94 hertz. So with that being said, I go over to the bass channel for the sample and I added an EQ8, and at 80 hertz, I just took pretty much all the frequencies out, and it was actually perfect because it left this nice little curve for the frequencies to ease back in. And if you look at the bass, there's not just frequencies playing right here. There are also some sub frequencies playing and some higher frequencies playing, but they ease into it. So it's perfect. The reason why I did that is because I didn't want the bass line to clash with the bass of the sample. You would have just had too many of the same frequencies playing, and it would have kind of just made the mix sound muddy. Another thing I did is on these two other channels, I have mids and I have highs. So on the mids channel, I just added an EQ3, just the mids were playing, and I added a utility and raised the width a little bit. Same thing with the highs, just the highs playing, and then I raised the highs. I raised the stereo up a little bit more, and that just makes the sample sound like it's surrounding you. I didn't do that with the bass line because I wanted it to be more mono than stereo. So I just put on a mono utility. After that, the beat was pretty much complete and it was time for me to sequence it. This is the finished product. Go ahead and listen if you want to jam out to it. Sequencing is also a very important part when it comes to beat making. If you guys want me to give you a video on how to sequence your beat without the beat getting boring and repetitive, let me know and I'll get that out for you. But with that being said, that's going to do it for this video. I had a lot of fun making this beat, and honestly, it kind of got me in the mood to make a whole album full of boom bap beats like this. So if that's something that you guys will be wanting, let me know and I'll get that out for you guys eventually. But with all that being said, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Peace out.
Yeah.